Hey guys, Double Wide 6, and today up on the bench I have this homlite chainsaw. This saw was about 5 minutes from getting crushed, and it probably should have gotten crushed. But anyhow, I grabbed it, and turns out it's a homlite 240, and everything's here except for the choke that's missing. But I did pull the cord, which it didn't retract, and it felt like it had really good compression. So yeah, we're gonna go through this thing today, and you guys can come along and fix it up. We'll see if it'll run. I am gonna hose the saw off, but before I get going on this thing, I want to clean up the rust a little bit, and I want to do that while the chain's still on the bar. Believe it or not, the chain is actually fairly sharp. You know, I can feel the teeth are sharp, but there's just a ton of rust on it. So I'm going to put this C-clamp on here. And, you know, there's a lot of methods for removing rust, but one of the easiest, fastest way to do it is a little bit of penetrating lubricant and wire brushing. So that's what we're going to do to get quick results here. So I'm going to put some penetrating oil on here. And we're going to be using a grinder with a cup brush. That worked out pretty well. Now we'll try it on this side. I don't think the saw was used too much, just because I think it sat maybe in a barn or something and just collected moisture and sort of rusted away, just because the compression seems so good on the saw. Also, when I looked under here, the clutch down in there wasn't rusted up. On the bottom side it was, but on the top it looked clean, and there's not a lot of wood chips in it. So I don't think it was used that hard. Using this grinding method because this will clean the bar and the chain. And I do have a chain sharpener, so we'll sharpen the chain as well if we get the saw running. Yeah, what's good is the chain is freed up, and it looks like it's going to try and turn. I was able to rotate the chain, so I'm going to oil a little bit in here. The chain rotated, which is really good because that means it's not rusted into the bar, and the bar is probably reusable. And the chain, I don't know how well you guys can see it, but I'll bring it in and we could see, let me see where you're at, like that tooth, you could tell it's pretty sharp. And as I said, I'm going to go through and sharpen it, but I did get the chain to rotate around here, And you could see like what I did right here. These are all shiny, and then these are the ones that were back underneath around the sprocket. So what I'm going to do is wire brush them once again while it's on the bar. This time I locked it in the vise. It's not quite as stable, but I think it'll work for the 30 seconds of grinding I need to do. I am going to wash this chainsaw up. So what I want to do at this point, now that I have the chain kind of freed up, is remove this cover. These are 7/16, and these are the original bolts. You can see they have a nice shoulder on them. A lot of times these bolts will vibrate loose and be lost. So as I said, I don't think that this saw is used overly hard. Alright, we have a little bit of tension on that chain, it looks like. And the chain tensioner is down in here. So we'll free that up, and nice metal cover, either aluminum or magnesium. Not quite sure how you'd tell the difference, but this piece is definitely light. Pull that off, and just want to take a look at all this stuff. Say that bar is 18 inch, which is a pretty good sized bar. And the good thing about all the insides here is that there's a lot of oil that gets in here from using the saw. So there's no rust up in here, and all these parts are here. And these drive sprockets look fantastic, like the saw was barely used. They look good. You can see a little wear mark, you know, from the chain, but that's normal. They're not like gouged out or anything. They really look like they're in good shape. Okay, so I'm taking a look at this muffler, and I'm sure this has never been off the saw, but I'd like to try and remove that so that we can just quick take a look at the piston. It's the best way to tell the shape of the saw. These bolts are an 8mm, or they're actually probably a 5/16, which happen to be the same. You know, sometimes your metric sets, they'll skip wrenches because they're the same as standard size. I'm not so sure why they have metric and standard. I can tell you metric bolts are better because the threads are closer together, unless you're working with an SAE that has the fine threads. but usually metric bolts have more holding power because the threads bite a little better because there's more of them. So a lot of times if I'm drilling out and putting in a helicoil, I usually switch over to metric threads, mainly because my helicoil set that I have, my good set, is a metric set. And I use that and then just use a metric bolt. For whatever reason, they don't really sell many SAE helicoil sets. You can buy them individually, but to get the whole set, they're hard to find. And that's probably because they're made in China, and China makes the metric ones, but I don't see them making the SAE ones. So our muffler's off. That looks good and clear. I saw there was like some mud on it, but I think that had happened just from where it was at the scrap yard. Well, I think the next thing that we want to do is try and get this plug out of here, and then we'll take a look in there at that piston. Well, that came free. Wasn't in there too tight. Sometimes people really crank these spark plugs down, which you really shouldn't do because you're screwing the spark plug into an aluminum block, and you can strip them. I see that mostly in tractors when the plugs are stuck. It's usually a tractor that someone torqued down pretty hard. Let's take a look at this plug. And that looks really good. It's not black and sooty, meaning that it would be rich or running rich. And it's not white like it's running lean. It is very clean, and it has kind of a light chocolate brown color and not much excess carbon on the outside. Alright, so the plug's out of there, and I want to try and show you guys the piston. So this isn't going to turn it over. Let me see if I can pull start it all. Not really. Alright, well, I'm going to put the plug back in, not all the way, just a little bit here, just for when I wash it off. And I'm going to also plug the muffler port. Well, it's time to clean up this barn find. I have my ultrasonic cleaner heated up, and I'm just going to throw in some of these parts. The chain's moving pretty well. There's some spots that are a little stuck, but we're going to clean it up in the ultrasonic cleaner because I got to clean it, or I got to sharpen it. So there's like a basket in here, so we'll throw this in here. And I'm using Dawn and a little bit of degreaser. So we'll put that in there, and we'll run it for a half an hour. The sprocket on here is freed up, but I'm just going to clean the crack on this a little. Even though the bar has some rusting and pretty heavy pitting, I don't know how well you guys can see that, a lot of pitting on there. Everything's working on it and it's not worn out or anything, it just needed a little cleaning up. So I feel pretty happy with that. The muffler, that came out pretty good, no holes or anything in it. So I cleaned up the outside. I'm going to blow out the inside a little. You can see there's a little bit of mud there. The screen looks good. This isn't packed up. So we'll blow that out a little bit. The screen's actually called a spark arrestor, and it prevents any hot sparks from coming out of the muffler and igniting a forest fire. Sometimes you'll see some saws bogged down. They won't rev up all the way, and it's not a carburetor problem, but the screen can actually get plugged up, and you know, it doesn't allow the exhaust out, and it causes the saw to bog down. Now what we're going to do is remove this cover here, which unfortunately has some cracks in it. So I'm going to need a new cover piece. If any of you guys have a cover that you're willing to sell, please let me know down in the comments, because I'll be looking for one of these. I had one of these same saws just about 3 or 4 months ago that I got rid of. And you just never know when you're holding on to parts if you're ever going to need them. And sometimes it just gets to be too much. So you got to clean some things out. Alright, I believe that's loose, but we're going to have to pull the other side of the handle. Might be time for the hose again. That cleaned up pretty well. I'm going to spray off these dogs with a little bit of lube. These dogs are spring loaded and they engage on the starter. Sometimes they're called paws. So we just want to keep them nice and free. They got a little bit of rust on them, but the springs are working fine. And with a little lube, we'll be good to go. Alright, next up we're going to work on this recoil. Now, what I'd like to do is put a new rope on here, but I want to make sure the saw starts and runs. So underneath here is a spring, and what we want to do is try and oil that up. And I'm going to try and do that from the top. We'll see if we can get any penetrating oil in there. Try and soak it a little bit. Work it a little by hand. I definitely don't want to be rewinding the spring on this thing. Now it seems to be moving a little bit, at least getting it to go back in. I think if we work it a few times here, it's still pretty tight. I'm gonna try and tap on it a little, because if there's rust in there, sometimes that rust will break loose. Well, it's moving a little bit, but not well at all. Question is, how many times do I try and do this before I end up taking it apart? Well, I think we're going to pull that apart, guys. So that kind of answers that question. Now, from what I remember, this spring should not jump out at me. I should be able to pull this cover off. And you want to just take your time. I think that spring was actually, yeah, you could see this thing got smacked around. This is actually bent, so that spring was pushed out. So we're gonna have the fun task of rewinding that, and I got to do all that in order to determine if the saw is going to fire when we add some fuel to it. So looks like we're going to be adding a new rope, just because this one's old and brittle. It's not frayed too bad. Alright guys, first step is going to be to flatten this thing out, because that was kind of the problem that was pushing that spring. Alright, that should be good. Clean that off. Still have a high spot. Okay. Next, we're going to go through and just wipe off the spring, because if there's any rust on the spring, that's going to cause problems. So we'll clean this thing out. And then we get the fun task of trying to wind this thing. So, let's see. This goes on here this way. Yep, so Looks like this just gets wound up and then set in here. Now, this is one of those things that's easier said than done. But luckily this spring is light. You know, some of the bigger 4-cycle springs are really tough to wind. But this one is pretty light, and it looks like it's in really good shape, other than the fact that it's unwound. So we're going to try and hold this thing, which usually is kind of tough on your fingers, but we'll bring it in. We just want to make sure that when we wind it, we're holding it a little bit smaller than the diameter of that cup that we're going to put this thing in. Okay, that should be good. All right. We're gonna cheat a little on this one. I had enough fun already on that. So we're gonna power wind this, and this is a special tool. It's a bit that kind of has an upside down U there. You want to make sure your drill's going the right way, and you just want to go really slow and pay attention to what you're doing. Oops. Hang on. I think I got it. If I can get that off there. Now I got to get this in here. Nothing's easy. Alright, so I think I got it. There we go. Power winding. That's a double wide 6 technique there. You're not going to find that one anywhere else on the internet. And we got to replace this rope right away, so we'll go ahead and do that. I like to cut them kind of close to the end, just so I know how long to make the next rope. So that gets cut. Rope's got to go through this hole, through the handle. And these are all easy things to screw up. So that's why I don't work on 2-cycle too often. Because if you don't do it every day, you really got to pay attention to what you're doing to get it right. All right. Little fire. Well, I know this thing went through here, so before I forget that, I'll put that through there. And we know that on the end we want a handle, so we'll put that on there. I made this rope a little longer than the last one on purpose, just because the last one seemed a little small. Let's see if it'll fit through this way. I think with a really small screwdriver, I can push that through. The other way to do it is to widen a hole, but if you widen a hole, I guess the knot could slip out of there, possibly. This does not seem to want to go. Okay, we'll put a knot on this end. Alright, so that's good. Now we got to go through here. Once we get through there, then we got to go through here, pick this up. At least they give you a big enough hole on this side. I don't know what that's sticking on. Put a knot on this end. Give this a yank. There we go. So that's in there good, tight, and we'll just push in this tail end of it. There we go. Alright, so now I believe we can set this spring back in here. Goes in here like this. There's like a little knob. This hoop's got to lock around this little red thing there. And now at this point, I believe we can pull this spring back. That should be good. So just as long as that thing's catching, which I can feel it is, we should be good. Alright, so we're going to put our screw in, and then we should be able to wind the spring. That should be good. Alright, so to wind this thing, what you want to do is there's a little notch here. We're going to pull the rope over to that notch. just like that, I think. There we go. And now we have the rope and the notch. We should be able to wind the spring. So we're just going to keep working this thing clockwise. It's a little slippery because I got some oil on this thing. Alright, that should be plenty wound. Now the rope is all wrinkled up, so we want to try and untwist that, carefully work it out of there, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we're finally getting to the point where we're making a little bit of progress. So we're going to put our recoil on there. And I don't know if you noticed it, but I pulled a little on that rope. And the reason I did that was sometimes they don't sit right on because the gears kind of gotta mate together properly and not bind. Sometimes they don't just drop on. So what I would like to do here is attach this cover and then add a little, dribble some 2-cycle fuel on top of the piston and see if this thing will fire. And hopefully it does. Otherwise we've wasted a good hour and a half on this thing. Better put this handle back together just so I have something to hold on to. Alright, so before we start it, we'll take a look at the piston, and we want to look for scoring in here. I don't know how well you guys are going to see this. So hopefully that lights it up for you, but I'll pull. You could see the ring there. 2 rings. They look good. If anything, that second ring looks like it may actually be locked in place, but the piston looks good score-wise. And I could see the cylinder there looks good too. So this saw does not have many hours on it. Plug looks pretty dry because I was hosing it off. Well, we'll dribble a little fuel in there, and if this will crank, that'll mean that we have a saw that we can fix. I don't have a choke on this saw because the choke is the one thing that looks like it broke and is missing. But yeah, I can choke it right here. So I believe that way's choke, but we don't really need choke because I got fuel in there. So gonna try and crank this thing. It's on run. There you go. We just saw a little bit of combustion. That's a good sign. Okay guys, so we're back to working on this. We took a break there and we're going to pull out these bottom screws because I believe we got to pull this whole engine out of here in order to get access to the fuel tanks. So they have 2 bolts down here. I'm gonna pull off this cover up here. This should show us the carburetor. Let's see what we need to deal with up here. This is broken. Looks like this is going to have to come out too. So it looks like in order to slide the engine out of here, I'm going to have to remove this clutch and drive sprocket. So we'll try and pull this. And it shows you which way it needs to turn off. We got to go that way. So we're probably going to have to block the piston from moving. So this is the old pull string that we replaced earlier. So we'll put a fair amount of this down in here. Alright, so that should be a good amount. And as the piston comes up here, it's going to get stuck on that rope. And that rope's soft, so it's not going to hurt anything. And now what we got to do is get something to tap on this clutch. So to go off, we want to go that way. Let's see what I have. Piston's going around again. There we go, right there. Boom. Nothing. Try it this way. There's just kind of moving on me because I couldn't hold it. Alright, so that should allow this whole thing to slide out of here, I believe. So we'll leave that rope in there. That might help tighten it a little. So in here we have 2 bolts. Yeah, these saws aren't easy to work on, that's for sure. Alright, so I think we gotta pop the carburetor off of here. Should be loose. Except the carb looks like it's sticking on the block a little bit. There's a fuel pump on here, or an oil pump. I'm not sure what this thing is, but looks like this is in the way. Looks like I'm gonna have to remove this handle because I can't get the carb out of here. So we got to pull this out. It's not really much else I can remove. I just can't undo this linkage. That was easy. Alright, I wanted this all to come off together so I can see what's up with all these lines. There's 4 different lines on here, so I'm going to have to make sure I get them sorted out. As I said, there's 4 lines on here. One of them goes, this is fuel mix, so this is gas and oil. So I'm going to mark this with an F. So that's the fuel line. This line is for oil. It goes up this oil pump. This line here gets negative crank pressure or vacuum pressure from the crankcase. And that's what the vacuum sucks in, makes this pump work. And that pumps oil, and oil comes out over here. That's what that hose is. So what I want to do is I want to get this carburetor off of here. And then we'll replace this line. These other lines look pretty good. I'm going to look in the tank at this one and see if that needs to be replaced. So here's a look at our carb. What I want to do is get this thing apart so I can throw it in the ultrasonic cleaner. This carb is a Zama. Wow, it looks pretty clean. Even the screen looks good there. That's a real good sign. I'm going to leave that gasket on there because I don't have another one. Even that doesn't look too bad at all. Alright, so we got everything out of there. The high and low, so this guy is adjustable. I'm going to take off this little rubber thing. And the low looks like it's a darker color, and the high looks like it's a bit shinier, and the high is a smaller head. So I'm going to turn these screws and see where they're at. So the first one I'm doing is the high. So it went in a half, 1, 1 1/8. That's the high. So I'm going to write that down. The high also has a little washer. Oops. And the low, we went in half, almost 1. So we'll call that 1. And then I'll make a note that the high is a washer, because I believe these needles are actually different tips. There's the low. You can see those needles look good, but as I said, they have different tips. The one on the right is tapered, the other one is different, so more of a needle. Alright, we'll clean that up since we've gone this far with this saw. And I'm letting my ultrasonic cleaner heat up. It's pretty cold out here, so that's going to take a while. And we can work on the fuel lines and the rest of this thing. So this piece of the air filter was broken. So I'm going to be using a little bit of super glue till I get the right part here. I like that super glue because it's actually thick, so it doesn't run too much. And that seated right where it needs to be, so I'm just going to clamp this off and let it sit. So what we're going to do is replace the fuel line. I already cleaned off this tank, and I'm reaching in here. There's our fuel filter. And that's how long our line's going to need to be. So to get the fuel line through here, I'm going to take a wire, push it in the back, and then bring it out the top hole, just like that. Then we'll take our fuel line and we'll attach it to this wire. Might actually pierce the end if I can, because that'll grip it tightly. I can't. So, alright, we'll bend this guy over. And we need it to crimp on there pretty tight. See if that works. So we'll take our fuel line, we'll feed it through, and we want to see it come out a little bit here, just like that. Now we can grab that. We'll put on a new fuel filter. And try and get that fuel filter in there. So this oil line, I don't know if it has a filter on it, but I'm going to put a little carb cleaner through it. And that doesn't appear to be clogged. And actually, the line seems to be in pretty good shape. It's not collapsing or anything. So I think we're going to let that go. While that ultrasonic cleaner's going, I'm going to try and put everything back together. It should be about the same way it came out. Here's the chain fresh out of the ultrasonic cleaner, and you can see it's nice and clean. That way it's not going to dull my sharpening wheels. So the ultrasonic cleaner just finished up. Looks real good. A little bit of dirt I see on it, but yeah, these gaskets look fine actually. Even the pumping diaphragm was in good shape. There's the needle. That looks good. Yeah, that feels nice and soft actually. So hopefully this works. Let me get a mat here and we'll put it back together. So we're getting to the final push here, and this is carb all clean, ready to go. I don't have the choke lever, so I'll be controlling the choke by hand for right now. And the only thing we need to do here is grab our fuel line, which I kind of have poking through here, and that's got to connect to here. So we'll try and grab that. Wiggle and work that thing on there. Alright, that seems good. And we need to hook up the linkage. And I probably should have hooked up the linkage before I did the fuel line, but it looks like, knock on wood, we have enough room. There we go. Now we'll put this oil pump back up here so that this thing can slip down. Alright. I think we're lined up pretty good there. Let's see. I had this clamped up. And this must go on this way. Let me set this in place. So that's the oil pump. Well, everything looks pretty good there. So now we'll try and drop this thing down. From what I can see, this will go on here this way. There we go. There's 1, 2. See if we can catch that. That one caught. And that one caught. So snug that up. Then they had an air filter. Keep that not too tight. And this top cover. So it locks down in here first, like that, and then this. Well, guys, it could have been worse. You could have had a broken trigger. So we got lucky. Alright. What's next? Electric's all hooked up. I don't have the plug in. That plug's supposed to run through there. We're going to have to cheat a little on this plug. So I pulled the boot off. And we'll push that through. Oh, could they have designed a stupider chainsaw? Alright, so I got that through there. Now I got to get this thing put back on. Yeah. There we go. Now, there's a hole where this thing fits in. Just like that. And then this boot, what I should do is probably put that boot on first and then drag it forward. I don't even know if that's going to be possible. There's like no room. See, unless you work on these things every single day, you're going to run into problems like this. And, you know, because I took that thing apart, I gotta go get a tool or something. Because I took that apart and didn't get it back together in the right order, I would have to pull everything apart. But luckily, that boot seems to be slipping on there better than I ever thought it would. Okay. So that's that. We still don't have the plug in there. I think we're almost there. I got this little blade thing. This will stop the chain if it comes off the bar. Oops, goes here. Alright, got one more up here that I forgot. That's this guy. And I need an Allen wrench for him. Whew, a chain sharp. Alright. So that's supposedly on there, I think. Here we go. Slip this guy on. This goes over the top. There we go. All right, guys. So there you go. 3 hours and a $50 saw. Hope it works. Well, almost forgot the spark plug here. So, little pre-mixed fuel, we'll prime it. And then we'll try and get the plug in there. Well, let's see what we got. I think that's choke. Alright, I'm going to turn off choke. Well, put on a little choke. Probably just getting fuel through the lines there. I don't know if that's on choke or not. Try it the other way. Try it halfway. Alright guys, I got some good news for you. Bobby is 12 years old and he just earned his position on the basketball team. Made the big traveling team this year. So we've been through a lot of challenges. He's been working hard and now he's able to compete at the level of the kids in his grade. I'm real proud of him. And you just saw him there using that chainsaw. We got everything tuned up and running well. I just trimmed some branches and Bobby helped out a little bit. Alright guys, I got the saw all tuned up. Everything's running as it should. I welded on a bolt here. It's on that little wing, so if you push it forward it's choke and back it's off. So that's simple. It works for me. Even labeled it so I know what's going on. Saw seems to run real well. It idles well. Seems to be pretty strong. I never did check the compression on it, but I can tell you it has good compression. And the oiler works good. So yeah, it's not dripping oil all over the place or anything. So pretty happy with it. I personally have switched over to a battery powered saw. I have the Milwaukee Fuel battery powered. It's like a 12.0 amp hour battery. And that thing will run for about 45 minutes. And it does a really nice job. And for what I do, I just trim trees and stuff. I don't burn firewood. So anyhow, guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoy the channel, please subscribe. Think about contributing to the Patreon. That would really help out the channel. So I appreciate everything and take care. See ya.